Hey everybody, and welcome back to another Max Velocity weather forecast. And in today's forecast, we'll be breaking down a massive severe weather event that'll impact a large chunk of the United States later this week. It'll bring the threat for significant damaging winds, extreme hail, and multiple tornadoes. I'll give you the latest breakdown on everything that you need to know in this forecast, but let's first begin with what's happening across the United States today, beginning with the southeast, which is where we're still seeing severe weather this afternoon. This is the same system that brought the tornado outbreak a couple of days ago, along with the massive hail event last night, and we are still seeing showers and storms this afternoon. Now, luckily, this system will eventually start to move off to the northeast over the next 24 hours, and it will be all in the past by Tuesday night, so we're luckily not going to see much more out of that. But our next storm system is way back out to the west. It's actually off the coast of California. You can't even see it, but that's what's going to bring our next huge severe weather event that'll impact a large chunk of the United States both Thursday and Friday. I'll have more details on that here in just a moment. So what does this mean over the next several days across the United States? Well, beginning with today, we are still going to see some showers and storms through about this evening. Most of it is already winding down now, but there might be still a couple of storms out there. But closer to around late tonight into tomorrow morning, there actually could be a little bit of light snow back up into the northeast. That low pressure system will finally move off the coast. This will not be a nor'easter by any means at this point, but back out to the west, you might start to notice, look at this, back over in California, that is our next storm system, 989 millibars, fairly strong low pressure system off the coast of California by Tuesday night. This is what's going to be our next event across the United States. Now, it might not look like much initially because it just fizzles out, but it'll cross over the Rocky Mountains, and that is where our next low pressure system will develop into Thursday night into Friday morning. This will bring the threat for some really serious severe weather. We could be talking about a widespread damaging wind event across the Midwest and Ohio Valley, and you can notice here going into Friday night into Saturday, this low pressure system rapidly intensifies. European model has it going down to 980 millibars. That is very strong low pressure system. This could bring a winter storm, but really the bigger threat right now will be the threat for severe weather, and eventually going into the late weekend and into early next week, that eventually starts to move out. So when I said massive earlier in this forecast, I really mean it, because going into Thursday night, it doesn't look like a huge area. This is our slight risk for severe weather Thursday night that really only includes areas like Oklahoma, North Texas, and back through southern Kansas, but this thing explodes once we go into Friday. There is a huge enhanced risk of severe weather for being 5 days out that extends from Illinois all the way through Arkansas. In addition to that, there's a slight risk outside of that that extends into North Texas. Again, this is a huge area for being 5 days out, but we could very well be talking about a widespread severe weather event. I would not be surprised if we go to a moderate risk of severe weather eventually. But now for the jet stream, this is going to be a huge part of this entire event will be the jet stream, really how it positions itself. Well, with this low pressure system going into Thursday night into Friday morning, the low pressure system will be primarily positively tilted. That means the severe weather threat will be a bit more conditional and limited across the southern plains. But once we go into Friday afternoon and evening, this trough becomes negatively tilted, and what that means is that we'll potentially see more significant severe weather, and this very well could be a widespread severe weather event, as I mentioned just a few moments ago. So we're really gonna have to watch this very closely. In terms of the low-level jet, this is what gives us an idea of rotating supercells here across the United States and where we could see that threat, especially with severe weather on the line here. Once we go into Thursday night into Friday morning, down in the southern plains, the low-level jet will be about 30 to 50 knots. That is a low to medium low-level jet, so the tornado threat should remain somewhat conditional and limited. It just depends on how many storms we see fire up. But going into Friday, that is when this low-level jet really cranks up, goes upwards of 60 to 70 knots. That is a fairly strong low-level jet, which means these rotating supercells will have a much greater potential of seeing a tornado threat, especially across areas in the Midwest. Look at this, by the way. Pretty impressive low-level jet, upwards of 80 to 85 knots here across Illinois and back through Indiana. This is, again, an area that we have to watch very closely for the threat for some widespread damaging winds and as well as multiple tornadoes. Now, let's break down for Thursday night, and then we'll break down Friday in just a moment. So in terms of Thursday, again, that slight risk includes southern Kansas, back through areas in Oklahoma, down Interstate 35 into north central Texas. This is primarily going to be for the threat of damaging winds, large hail, and also a couple of tornadoes. Now, there is a lot of uncertainty with this event. There's a lot of things that could happen and might not happen. So in terms of the instability going into Thursday, we're really not going to see a whole lot of instability here across Texas until really late Thursday. That is when we'll begin to have more southerly winds. We'll have instability start to grow across this region, and this is where severe weather will very well remain possible possible, especially near the dry line. And where that dry line sets up is crucial to really determine on where we see severe thunderstorms. Now, in terms of the moisture content, in terms of dew points, there will be a lot of humidity as we go into Thursday night. It's primarily going to be across southern Oklahoma and back through North Texas, where there will be some buoyancy. Low to mid 60s for dew points will equivalent to some severe weather potential. Those dew points do go into southern Kansas by overnight Thursday night into Friday morning, which may lead to a couple of severe storms up that direction. Now, with this current event, though, we're really going to be watching for a threat of discrete supercells along that dry line. We're not really talking about a line of storms purely out of the Thursday into Friday events. And this is a much closer look at the low-level jet here in the southern plains. As a friendly reminder, this is what helps rotate supercells to produce a tornado threat. There will be somewhat of a low-level jet going into late Thursday night into the overnight hours across especially Oklahoma and as well as southern Kansas, where 50 to 55 knots is definitely possible. So the tornado threat will probably stay back north of the Red River Valley. That's where I think the greatest tornado threat would be if any discrete cells do develop. And eventually going into Friday afternoon and evening, that is when that low-level jet really cranks up across areas in the mid-Mississippi Valley, back through Ohio Valley, and as well as the Midwest. Now, let's briefly talk about the timing. There's obviously a lot of uncertainty to begin with in terms of timing, because where will this low pressure position itself and where will the dry line be are two really critical points to this entire severe weather event, at least for Thursday night. And in terms of the European model, it's not really indicating a whole lot of storm activity throughout Thursday or even into the overnight hours. The only activity that it really indicates would be back to the west near the dry line, which is where maybe a couple of supercells might develop. But again, this does not seem to be a widespread severe weather event for Thursday night into Friday morning. And you might be wondering, could we see more discrete supercells develop back near that dry line over in West Texas and North Central Texas and even in Oklahoma? Yes, it's definitely possible. But the thing is, right now, there is still some uncertainty of where that happens. So we'll keep it posted with the latest as we get closer. But obviously, the much more widespread event will be going into Friday. That's from Texas all the way back through Illinois. And again, that is where we could see some very significant severe weather. I, again, would not be surprised if a moderate risk of severe weather does end up getting issued. But for right now, enhanced risk of severe weather from Illinois back through Arkansas. And really, one really cool feature of this is how the humidity just lifts to the north with southerly winds being very strong. Look how far north these dew points go. We could see some 60s go as far north as areas like Iowa and even into Illinois. That's quite rare for this time of the year, even though we're getting closer to April. We don't typically see this very often, so it's definitely really interesting to see how the dew points go that far off to the north, and even mid-50s, even into Michigan. That is where we could also see some isolated severe storms, and dew points back down to the south, obviously much higher near the Gulf Coast, which is where we could see some dew points upwards of 70, which is where severe weather and a lot of rain will also be possible as we go into late Friday night into Saturday. Now, in terms of the instability, there will obviously be a ton of instability lifting pretty far off to the north. Valleys upwards of 1,000 to 2,000 joules per kilogram, up and down from, again, Wisconsin down into Texas. That is where I would expect some severe weather to be quite significant. Damaging winds, again, would be my main concern across that region, but a few tornadoes and maybe a little bit of large hail is not out of the question. In terms of the timing, we are very early still on the timing guide with this entire system since we're still multiple days out, but a few cells may still be severe out in front of that line of storms going into Friday afternoon and evening. Once we get into Friday evening, that is when that line of storms will develop. That is where we could see some significant severe weather with damaging winds ranging from 60 to 80 miles per hour. We also could see some embedded tornadoes produce a tornado threat. And eventually going into Saturday, things do become much more limited in nature, most likely going to see a marginal or slight risk of severe weather down the road once we get closer to Saturday. Thanks for watching. Make sure to hit the like button down below and subscribe if you've not already. This forecast is brought to you by Platinum Contracting and All Dents Repair.